Today we're going to be talking about asset protection and whether it's something you really need. Now, for some people, particularly a lot of people in the middle class, it seems like a really cool idea to protect your assets and to prevent them from being taken, right? It really is smart, particularly when you work hard for those assets. But there's some practical realities around asset protection that I really want to open up today and explore a little bit together so that we really have a good foundation on what really asset protection even means and whether it makes sense in a lot of different situations, right? I see people come and they always say, yeah, I want to protect everything. But the truth is, there's generally a trade off in cost and flexibility versus asset protection. If you wanted to protect every dollar of everything you own, the cost would be tremendous and it would be very inconvenient. And for that reason, most people end up somewhere in that middle range. And that's something I, as an attorney, sit down and talk with people about, right? This is not an uncommon common topic when I meet with my clients, the business owners, the business leaders that I work with, and we talk about where they are, what they want to protect, what they're afraid of, what they think might be possible as far as risks to their assets, and then what's practical. As always, I can't give you legal advice over a camera, over a file or video sharing service. Obviously, I can't have that kind of one on one relationship. All we can talk about today is general principles, ideas, and lay that foundation. And my goal always in these videos is to help you know a little bit more so that you'll be a little bit smarter when you go approach your attorney and sit down and have these conversations. I always advise people to get legal counsel on important issues like this. I personally view asset protection as a continuum, right, between no asset protection and maximum asset protection. And you can choose where you want to go on there. Of course, most people are going to say, well, why don't I just get the maximum? And the reason why is cost and loss of flexibility, right? So as you start to accumulate significant assets, certainly employing asset protection does make sense. And like many things in life, you can get a lot for a little on the lower end of the spectrum, right? So if you're a business owner, setting up an LLC or corporation is very basic. It doesn't typically cost a lot to do that as a percentage of your business operation size, but you get a whole lot of asset protection there, right? And the reason why having an LLC or corporation as a asset protection vehicle is it is a firewall between your personal life and your business life, right? A properly formed legal entity should act as a separate legal person that is separate from you. It has its own assets and liabilities. Therefore, liabilities of the business shouldn't flow through that firewall back to your personal assets. Vice versa, you shouldn't have a personal asset or judgment, auto wreck, other things, that directly takes away from the assets of the LLC, right? So by putting that firewall between the two, you are separating the two, and that is a great deal of protection. From there, we can layer up. But that first layer of insurance, of adopting an LLC, of setting up a corporation, of having that documentation in place is really almost for everybody the type of exercise where you say, oh, yeah, there's no doubt that this minimal amount of cost is worth the protection we're going to get. As you start moving up the chain in asset protection and start moving into trust domestically, thinking in terms of the U.S. in this instance, but some of this applies internationally as well. Domestically is usually your first layer of ease and cost, right? It's easier to do things domestically generally than it is to transfer to another country. And then the second layer is taking your assets out of the country. Well, moving your assets out of the country legally, being done properly in advance of liens against them or other issues, but diversifying your assets among multiple countries and multiple jurisdictions certainly makes it harder for judgments and other things to follow you throughout the world, but it also typically adds a significant amount of cost, right? This is not a thing that's practical for, under $1 million. I mean, occasionally I get people approach me and they're like, I'm getting an inheritance or, other windfall somehow of, $1 million, and I want to put it all offshore. Well, by the time you start setting up bank accounts in the offshore jurisdiction, getting trustees involved, getting legal documentation in place, you start learning that maybe the cost and the benefit are not in alignment with each other. Now, if you're moving into tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, it certainly makes sense. And it certainly makes sense, too, if it's combined with some broader strategy of residence, citizenship, taxation. All these things can be brought into play with that. But you really need to tailor your asset protection strategy to you. What amount of assets do you have? What amount of exposure do you have? The type of career you have, the types of transactions you're engaging in, what you own, what types of assets you hold. These all can play into your risk profile. And then you really need to look at that. I did a video here on the channel not too long ago about whether you should have one LLC per property. And I recommend you go back to that. A lot of similar considerations there. So if you're thinking about that, if you're a rental real estate owner and you're thinking, do I have one LLC? Do I have 10 LLCs? Do I put 10 LLCs in one property? Do I have one LLC per property? Kind of went into that. And it was a very similar analysis, this sliding scale of cost versus benefit. So the default answer is yes, you want to think about it. And even if you don't have significant assets compared to other people in the world, they're probably significant to you. So it certainly makes sense to do some things to protect them. LLCs, corporations, insurance being just some of the very basic lower level building blocks. Whether it starts making sense to set up trusts, offshore entities, family partnerships, other things like that could potentially have some asset protection pieces to them is really a more specific decision about you, your family, your risk tolerance, and how much cost you really want to put into it. So I hope that gives you a general overview if you're just not that familiar with the area. If you have questions or things you'd like me to explore in future videos, please reach out. Don't put anything confidential in the comments or publicly available. Obviously, people can read public comments on a video sharing service, so I don't want people seeing, your confidential information. Even if we're not attorney-client, you still want to protect that confidentiality. But if you have specific questions, ideas for future videos, I'm always looking for things to cover, so please let me know. If you're getting value from this, go check out our library of past videos and consider subscribing. Thanks for tuning in, folks. I'll see you for another video soon.